They've ordered their Big Mac and they want to eat their Big Mac. And suddenly you've gone, we're not serving Big Mac, we're only doing McRib. And they're like, what? No, where's my Big Mac? I always ordered the Big Mac. Why did you do
Change
this
is
to me?
hard.
Yeah, and then when you get to the end of the run and you bring back the Big Mac and you take away the McRib, people go, you remember when they served McRib? I love the McRib. When are they going to do that again? But that's the fun of it. You know, do you want to get the same Mad Lib story every month? No.
Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack, and we also have
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
Well, we have some news that's sort of confirmed and not so confirmed that Dan Slott might be moving from Marvel, or maybe he's staying with Marvel and doing Superman. But there's the idea that he might be doing Superman in
Oh no. Uh-oh. Oh no.
in 2025. So
in 2025 we can expect the superior Superman.
you know, that's the thing. The crazy thing is, when I think I read his Arkham Asylum, and I was like, okay, this guy is decent. And what was it? The Superior Spider-Man came. That was after Brand New Day, right?
Yeah.
So you had Brand New Day, which was, you know, kind of not necessarily, well, not the story, but the period after that was not necessarily the 80s, but kind of like the 80s Spider-Man, right? So they had it where it was kind of the status quo, and he was doing monthly comic books. And then, in my mind, he kind of ran out of stories. And that's where we got the Superior Spider-Man, is like, say, hey, what if we took the restraints of Spider-Man? He would be almost like, I think the way Roger Stern wrote, virtually unbeatable. And it's like, that's not really my Spider-Man. I like, you know, the Spider-Man that could get hit, you know, could get hurt, something like that. But, you know, it's kind of tough to see that he went that way, because I liked his Arkham Asylum. There was a couple other things he did that I liked. I was iffy on the She-Hulk, but he had at least read some of the stuff. And then post this part, we've gotten, you know, let's look at the Bleeding Cool ad. Didn't have it up, but let's look at that. So they're not necessarily sure, but they think it's pretty definite. And so what do you think about this?
Dan Slott on Superman seems to be Brian Bendis on Superman Part 2. I see no reason for him to be on this book except for name recognition.
Well, that's the other thing. Name recognition is an important part of you know, a title, a creator's success. I mean, it doesn't always work. Like, obviously, Brian Bendis, I, of course, was one to say, hey, there's not much else Brian Bendis can do. Why not do Superman? And then you could probably get the big numbers that DC wants. So I was kind of like, you know, not to say I was for it, but it felt like what else could they do? So, and then
they could do better than that. No, I mean, Superman is always perceived as this tough character, the right, but the approach is usually wrong. And well, without making the show into a Superman show, which of course I would love to do, the approach is that there's something fundamentally wrong with this character. Mm-hmm. And so the only thing that we can do to really sell him is either we're going to try to do the stuff that works for the other guys. We'll do Thor. We'll break him down to build him back up. Oh, that doesn't work. We'll get rid of his secret identity. Oh, that doesn't really work either. And they seem to forget, why do people like this character? Oh, we know. It was Action Comics 1 when he's running around and he's roughhousing and he's like, he doesn't really care. And, you know, this is like, you know, when him was at his best. And like, no, because he sold better 2 years later when he stopped doing all of that. So they don't seem to really get the character. And this is a top-down thing, because if Bendis had come in and made these decisions and these guys are like, no, you know, we're not doing that, it wouldn't have happened. But the idea was like, oh yeah, you know, Brian Michael Bendis, you know, we'll have the name recognition, let him cut loose, let's see what happens. Dan Slott, all of my all of my reading with Dan Slott is Spider-Man. That's it. And where you've got some stuff that I think is definitely enjoyable, the big thing that always stands out in my mind was Superior Spider-Man, which I thoroughly disliked. And that's what I always think these guys have in the pocket when they approach a character like Superman. Because to be quite honest, Spider-Man is as much of an archetype as Superman. If Superman is the hero, then Spider-Man's the everyman. And the only when you come to Spider-Man and one of your biggest ideas is to kill him off for how long was that storyline? Almost 3 years?
It was pretty long. It was they had him
When
in the weeds for a pretty long time, which was and
when you
they,
just
it was
go
pretty
ahead.
wrong with how they handled it. You know,
Yeah, and then everything that you're doing with Doc Ock is like, oh, well, see, this is the stuff that we could, Peter should be doing. He should be doing this. I'm like, no, that's a totally different character with the whole Parker Industries stuff. And like, no, I mean, I'm not necessarily someone who needs to see Spider-Man get beat up all the time or beat up. That's not necessarily, something that would key me in for the character. But the everyman part is something that always attracted me to Spider-Man. And he also has a higher sense of morality than a lot of the other superheroes, especially the Marvel superheroes for that matter. So those are things that I liked and attracted me to the character overall. When you, those are the stories I would like to see. And instead, I mean, with that whole brand new day thing, I mean, that was just like imperial fiat. I don't want him to be married anymore. And that is still staying. That's the only reason why he's not with Mary Jane is because that is still pretty much the fiat that they want. It was the same thing while Bendis was there with Daredevil, and he couldn't have a secret identity because, of course, nobody wanted to run afoul of him. He was still writing stories. Blah blah blah. Same thing, same thing here with Spider-Man. But those are the things that I remember. And if you're coming to Superman again, this is an archetype. He's also one of the most popular superheroes out there. He's very recognizable. Most of the story ideas you have probably already been done. And I don't see Dan Slott. If there was something somebody could refer me to say, yeah, see right over here, this shows how good of a writer he is. Not how much he understands Spider-Man or something of that nature, but this is how good of a writer that he is. So you can trust him coming on to Superman that he's going to have some good ideas. I don't know of anything like that. And, somebody would have to introduce me to those types of stories that were penned by him so I could have a little bit more confidence in what he would do. But the other thing is that it's also a top-down thing with DC when it comes to Superman. They are terrified of the Silver Age. There's something fundamentally wrong with this character. Even though right now the stories have been good. The stories have been good since what was that storyline? Infinite Frontier.
hmm
And this is right after the whole War World saga. Action Comics became more like Superman Family, and Superman's got Josh Williamson on it. Stories have been good, if not really, really good, but there's no buzz on the book. There's no buzz on the book. So that's what they're looking for. We want to get some buzz. We want to try to get people in here. And that takes time to cultivate some really good stories where people, I'm going to come in, I'm going to be entertained. I'm even going to be surprised. And that's kind of hard when they keep saying, we don't want to do any of the Silver Age stuff. Well, that's when the character was at his most popular. So if DC is going to inhibit that type of stuff, and that's something that Bendis actually didn't seem to have a problem with. He had no problem giving that aspect of Superman, in terms of the sense of wonder when it comes to his abilities and the things that he can do with them. He didn't have any problem nailing that aspect of the character. It was everything else that he just seemed to want to jettison. So, but again, that's a top-down thing where DC's like, yeah, we need to shake this guy up. The only thing is they are in perpetual. They've been since 1986 in perpetual motion of trying to shake this character up. And the most successful thing they did to shake him up was to kill him off. So, and you can't do that again. But hey, who knows? Maybe he'll do the. Wouldn't that be funny if he did the Superior Superman and killed off Clark and put Lex Luthor's brain inside of Superman's body, and everybody still thought he was Clark, and we got 3 years of that? Wouldn't that be wild? Oh, I
Well,
probably shouldn't have said it.
I think in my mind, the flaw in the big flaw, because it was definitely a comic book plot. The big flaw was that it wasn't something that Doc was in Doc Ock's wheelhouse. Because a friend of mine had brought it up, and he was showing me the story, and I was like, if it was just someone that was kind of a real mastermind, his outside of him being a big person in radiation or radiology, Doc Ock doesn't seem to be like, even when they dragged him into like, there was no point in dragging him into Secret Wars to have a scene where he hurt Colossus for some strange reason, which he shouldn't have been able to.
Well,
And
you got to sell the toys, right? You got to sell the toys.
then he's fighting Thor, and I'm just like, Spider-Man. Why is Spider-Man fighting the entire Wrecking Crew, and Thor's fighting Doc Ock? So I'm a fan of Doc Ock, but I was just like, I think this is a case of, I'm all for also mixing up villains, but at the same time, you're mixing up a villain for the wrong story, for someone to decide to take that. And I think one of the things that the mistaken idea, someone assuming someone else's identity, I'm not saying it's gonna happen. It's fine.
That's it. I mean, when you look at that type of stuff you're talking about, those are toy decisions. Those are toy decisions. Who's going to be one of the most popular characters? Spider-Man.
Well,
right? Spider-Man. So it's going to be cool to see Spidey fight all these guys. And when you get the toy, you can replicate the fight that he's taking out all the X-Men. He's taking out the Wrecking Crew. And then Doc Ock, you know how we'll get to sell him? We'll put him with Spider-Man. Okay? We'll put him with Spider-Man, and then you can always recreate the Doc Ock, Thor battle. So those are like toy decisions. Those aren't real. I mean, well, it was Secret Wars too. But those are toy decisions to maximize the potential of, hey, what can we recreate from this storyline?
Don't tell that to Jim Shooter. But I think ultimately the someone switching up the person to assuming the identity is a story that's, I'm not gonna say I'm against. The problem is the villain, and at the same time not making it so you assume the identity, and it's like a red carpet in the things that he can do. Like the idea of like John Walker, U.S. agent, when he was Captain America. It was like, even though he killed and he was stronger than Captain America, it was a tough job to take on. It's like you put Doc Ock in there, and he's just like, Namor? Let me just beat the hell out of Namor. He's such a lame character. You got no skill. You're not smart. It was just like, you're kind of just deciding you're in. It's like I think the Mark Waid in the Flash. Like, you've become the character now. Like, you've actually replaced Doc Ock, and you're the character. So, and that's a fine line that you have to watch for. So, I think ultimately it's hard to say, because I did like his earlier stuff that he was doing, and then ultimately it's just kind of tough that he's now he's baby with a beard. Like, we got to see him in the Marvel thing, and it was just like a total mess to see him being at Marvel, slacking and that sort of thing. We didn't get to see someone who's really crafting a comic book the way anyone who would want to be, in comics is like, wait a second, you don't have the story together, you don't have this. Now, there's things where, writers, I think this is the thing. I've had people I have issue with turn out good stuff, but at the same time with Dan Slott, his FF, his Fantastic Four, which he called comfort food, and he got in, he married off Ben and Alicia, gave them a whole bunch of alien kids, and for me, the whole thing was off the mark, because he took the entire edge off of it. Now, the current run doesn't have much more of an edge, but it's just not just like totally waffling on this. And then throwing the Superman, I don't know what slot we're gonna get, which is kind of tough to say. So, ultimately, I think it'd probably be good for the titles initially, but at the same time, will he, as I wasn't a fan of Fabian Nicieza on X-Men or Scott Lobdell, but when they went to other titles, because it wasn't the X-Men, I could see, all right, these guys aren't bad. Like, they got some things to them. that they can do. It's just like I want them to look at certain issues to get the right characters that I was seeing in the comics. But ultimately, it's he's a big name, and this is the last big name at the time that's come along as a writer. And I thought it was going to be successful for Bendis, but it fell apart for him. Sad to say that he seemed to be able to. I thought he'd be able to do more character stuff and do the space stuff because he had introduced a wacky villain in there, but it just seemed like okay.
Which one?
What's it? Raga? What's it? Zul? That guy?
Oh, Rogolzar?
Rogolzar, yeah. So I was like, okay, this is like a DC type villain. It's like maybe he'll be able to kind of rise above this, and then it's just like, what's this? The secret identity? Does he know that they're gonna do secret identity stories not 2 seconds after you just did the other secret identity story, the truth storyline.
That's what he did with Daredevil. It was the exact same thing.
2 seconds.
Literally, the storyline before he came and got on Daredevil had Daredevil in a court of law. Okay, Matt Murdock was there, and Daredevil was there, and so anybody who was thinking it was like, no, the two of these guys are in the same room together. That will be the end. That should be the end of it. Bendis came on and was like, hey, did that story even happen? I don't know. And he just decided he was going to he wanted to do Born Again. He wanted to do his version of Born Again, top-down decision. Hey, this guy's got the fan following, so on and so forth. Let's come on. And what I also thought was bad about it was that the people who came on to read it, they didn't read Daredevil before Bendis got on the book. And so all those stories didn't even exist. So I might have been one of the few people like, hey, you just did this storyline. Shut up. This is great. So the new readership came on, loved everything. Old readership was pretty much like, look, are you staying or you're leaving? We're like, okay, we're out of here. But he brought in enough people, and then that became like a definitive run on Daredevil. And more so than what Frank Miller did with Born Again, that really weighed down the character, really made him into this sad sack. I mean, worse than like, if you thought if the whole idea, because Daredevil is created in the vein of Spider-Man, and if the whole idea was for him to have, sort of those regular guy troubles, they amalgamated every little thing into a problem for him. Daredevil's identity is exposed. He's getting sued. It was just too much. It was just too much at the end of the day. Then he becomes the kingpin of crime. Just, ugh. But that's the stuff that the readership likes, and this is the stuff that Bendis excels at. But when you go to Superman, well, okay, you can do the space stuff. Hey, I like that stuff. I don't want to see him in Metropolis all the time. Okay, you're doing the power stuff, the fantastic, the sense of wonder. Great, I'm getting that. All right, what about the character stuff? Oh, well, I'm going to send his son off and then bring him back, like 10 years older. Like, huh? Him and his wife won't be living together any longer. What? Oh, by the way, I'm going to out him as, Clark Kent. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. These are staples of what works for the character and has worked for the character for over 80 years. Who told you this was good? Top-down decision to just, hey, wreck shop. If Dan Slott comes over and, see, and then again, I don't know. I've said this about John Byrne or Alan Moore, I would say so as well. Grant Morrison. These guys are writers. They're not people that have a certain style. No, I said this about John Byrne as an artist. John Byrne is an artist. John Byrne has his own style, but he can draw a myriad of different ways. That means if I told him, hey, can you do something, Kirby-esque for me right here? He can do it. It's not that he only has one particular style. At the end of the day, this guy can actually draw. And then you had guys who could actually write. Let me use Stan Lee, for an example, where Stan Lee understood the difference between, say, a mystic adventure, a cosmic adventure, okay, a scientific adventure, and then an urban drama, if you will. He understood the difference between all of these things and what were the elements that should be in these particular stories. Whereas with Bendis, it was just like, hey, we just need to shake things up. Everybody needs to have drama. Everything. Like, no, that's not where this character is at. You've got to be able to exemplify those particular things. I don't know where Dan Slott is in terms of his writing ability, but if you bring him on and the higher ups are just like, hey, go crazy with it. We're just hoping for a big sales boost. We're hoping we put on. I mean, pretty much they want 1986 again. Let's just get a Marvel name over here, get some buzz, and hopefully we sell a bunch of books. It worked before. Let's try it again.
Well, I think the hard part is that we're not the same with what's with Bendis is that the everything is kind of peeled away for these kind of flights of fancy. Like in the case of, I don't know, it just feel like, all right, we just knowing that he was a guy that could, come on and do, oh, I'm doing this book, I'm doing a humor book, I'm doing, like what's that thing? He had definitely as an amateur, he had those qualities, and then as a pro, it's just like, okay, I'm just, I'm the gimmick, that sort of thing, and it's kind of tough to see that portion where it's like I still remember the beginning, and I know a lot of people, go left as far as the writers, and I would say like 70s Englehart in comparison to 80s Englehart, whereas maybe not so in his Batman stuff, but everything else was kind of this new kind of Englehart. So I guess the last I could say about it, because ultimately, I gave, the idea of Bendis getting on there was, was a decent idea. But I mean, ultimately, it falls in line with the, what is it? I guess the best description of it is, Denny O'Neil on Wonder Woman, where it wasn't like, let me just look through this and see what I can do with the character. So no, what's the mood? Emma Peel, let's kind of do that. And let's give her, because let's not just have her have karate and stuff. Let's have her have a judo master to show her this stuff. And it's just like, how do you take the Wonder Woman out of Wonder Woman? So it's like, that's one of the things that you have to look forward to when you got the top guy who knows, like Daniel O'Neill's done a million different types of stories, but then you get on something and say, it's about me. So what, I'm not taking a tone from a period that I remember that I liked, or amalgam of periods that I like. I'm going to do an approach that's just this, this sort of thing. So, and then be like, I'm disowning that what I did. Or, I mean, I guess the same could be said for Marv Wolfman, post crisis, where he disowned everything. But, he was the person who could seemingly do different stuff. So yeah, my last thing is that I hope for the best. I would think try to get back to your center, but it always seems hard for writers to, kind of get back to their center, because, when we see them when they get famous, it's not something that can, well, these latest writers have been able to sustain it. I guess in the best way would be Grant Morrison, but at the same time, you see him being pushed off of Green Lantern. So, you can fall from favor at some time, but it's like the seesaw of when you get hot, and then, obviously an artist can decline in their style as they go along, but the writer is just kind of like, why is there such a shift here? This is totally not the guy that I first saw, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, people can change, have new ideas. I just hope for the next thing that, that he can, come in this thing and say, I have something to prove.